There's no cold turkey period. There's no, except from the fact that you might have to divide yourself from people that you've foolishly thought were, your guides. I mean, we're habitually asking the misguided for our guidance. I mean, that's obvious that that needs to stop. But as you proceed along this particular apophatic, catabolic way, you will find that there's enormous empowerment from it. You'll become really good at it. I try to teach it even to children when I've had the chance. So I believe in it thoroughly. It doesn't mean you completely negate other things, but it just is a new slant on things, a new way of approaching life that gives you a new set of filters, a new set of tools to work with life. And that becomes very, very empowering. Well, we're also being helped in this process by certain scientific discoveries, many involving the DNA, many involving consciousness itself. And we're starting to, just like the quantum scientists had to discover when they looked into the subatomic particle and something, that many of the shaman and many of the mystics of the past were quite right in what they spoke about when they talked about the ether or the infinite void and the way that consciousness would interrelate with matter. They were forced to accept, Heisenberg and Rutherford and many of these other people had to accept. Bohm, not Jacob Bohm, but Niels Bohr and Bohm, the other holographic theorists and quantum theorists, had to accept that the mystics of old were right. Now, in the work of people like Bruce Lipton, we're looking at consciousness and realizing that when we talk of things like body, DNA, fate, we are actually talking about consciousness. Not as Michael Tsarion would go on talking about, but in a scientific way. Really hardcore sciences can prove this now. There's many experiments that show this. To the point where they're saying, and rightly so, that DNA is not this Lego set that the media always shows you, that sort of this construct. That's just an image. That's just a model. That doesn't exist within you, really. What exists within you is vibration, right? Which again is overlaid upon frequency, which is overlaid upon consciousness. So in other words, when they're talking about heredity and genetics affecting your behavior and your life and all of these kinds of things, actually it's the reverse that's true. Consciousness is supreme. Consciousness is supreme, and consciousness is found in humans in the highest form. So DNA, the cells, your fate, all of these things, illness, like I said, destiny and fate, what happens to you, the people that you bring in front of you, the relationships you have, again, as we said in the beginning, your vision of yourself, which will then affect your vision of other people. All of this is rooted in consciousness. And therefore, the person who takes control of their consciousness, cleans their consciousness, like Blake said, the doors of perception, if you cleanse that, then you have absolute sovereignty over the body and even your genetics and things. And scientists know this all too well. They're just not going to broadcast it to the public and open the door to selfhood, are they? I would go so far, and then the next step, of course, is to say, but there is one slight glitch with this, and that is that consciousness is not all conscious. The psychologists have pointed out, of course, that there's a thing called the unconscious, right? And Bruce Lipton accepts this because he even says that 99.9 something of our conscious is in the dark, so to speak. And the part that we use in everyday life is very, very small amount. I mean, he gives a really very small figure. And yet, there we are, using that tiny, tiny part of ourselves. So then, my work then has a lot of validity because I emphasize, as the psychologists do, that even though consciousness is the prime datum, you have a sensor between your conscious mind, the ego world, and this thing that they call unconscious, for want of a word. That part of the unconscious has been given other names. William Blake called it imagination, and others have called it the spirit or the soul, right? And in fact, that's what it is. It is actually the place where your true selfhood resides. So you can't really have the power we've been talking about until there's some sort of integration between the conscious and unconscious aspects. And again, what have we done? The road has just led us right back to the realm of psychology. So to answer your question in brief then, if we do not, and to re-emphasize what I said, if we do not work with psychology, not academically and all of that, I mean just a person going and studying it themselves and finding what they can get out of it themselves. And this may even include ventures into poetry and art, you see, and philosophy as well. We don't know. Or music, whatever. There's many aspects to this. But unless you do, well, you're going to remain a victim, if not of this tyranny of this age, of some other tyranny that will pop up in its place tomorrow. Like William Blake said, that the fist that crushes the tyrant's head becomes a tyrant in its stead. If you look back through history, it's just been one big wall-to-wall tyranny from thousands of years ago, Babylonians, the history of Iceland, the history of Finland. Let's go back. Take the British colonies, the British Empire. Let's go back, to the Sumerians, the Indians, the Portuguese. Everything in this world has been just one club bashing over somebody's head, or one tyrant replacing another tyrant. And it could be the same in the future. You might have a little more affluence, you might have a little less. You might have a little bit more egalitarianness. Women may have a little bit more freedom. They may not. A little bit more good, a little bit less. But you're talking about one endless process of tyranny. What my work is all about is to end it once and for all. And to do that, you've got to look deeply. I'm not just talking about spring cleaning, you see, and just a sort of superficial cleansing here. I believe in what the Maya talked about. We're in an age of awakening. There's even anecdotes and hints in the Bible and the other scriptures about this. So I very much believe it from my astrological work that this is upon us right now. So we have the chance to radically change the way things are, once and for all. But it's not going to be done if consciousness is not brought to the table, because of course it all depends on whether there can be a healthy merging of the conscious and unconscious minds. And it is exactly that premise that the architects of control that I talk about in my work absolutely fear. I get a question a lot, do they fear us? Are they in fear? Yes, and that's the part they're afraid of, is if this starts to work, which is why they've misrepresented psychology to people. They bash all the conspiracy people. They don't want the galvanization of these different subject matters. They're very against it. They've seeded the movement with their own agents, like they did the Christian movement, and to make sure that there's a lot of bickering and fighting and all these kinds of things. So they're very much adept at trying to make sure that this particular message doesn't get out. Because as long as you dive into the pigsty that they've created for you, i.e. the political sphere, the charitable sphere, the social spheres, they know that you're going to go round and round in circles, and you may take one step forward, but you can take 10 steps back. And you're ultimately under their dominion and under their rules, because they've created this dialectic. They've created this, as David Icke says, problem, reaction, solution scenario. They've created the good cop, bad cop scenario. A little bit of good, a little bit of bad, you see. And they know that really nothing ultimately changes. You just have a topical good at the bottom of the pyramid, but the big boys at the top are not in any way threatened. So what I talk about is much more deeply, powerful than that. And it offers us tools to really change the status quo and put an arrow through the third eye of these people. Really, it's like see their underbelly and strike hard at the roots of evil rather than at the branches.